6:43 a.m. The coffee maker sputtered like it was choking on the same thing sitting in Ava's chest. She stood barefoot on the cold tile, staring at the blinking light on the machine, unable to remember if she had already pressed the button or only imagined doing it. The house was quiet in that strange way homes get after love leaves, but the furniture stays. 3 weeks until mediation. 3 weeks until she would have to sit across a table from the man who used to trace circles on her back while she fell asleep. Now he sent emails through lawyers. Her phone buzzed on the counter. Unknown number. She let it ring. It rang again immediately. Her stomach dipped. Only one person had started doing that lately, calling twice from blocked numbers when he wanted to break the rules without technically breaking them. She answered but did not speak. A breath came through the speaker. Familiar, controlled. Then his voice low and calm in the way that used to make her feel safe and now made her feel hunted. I hope you are ready to be reasonable at mediation. Ava closed her eyes. Her free hand gripped the edge of the counter until her knuckles hurt. Our lawyers handle communication, she said, keeping her voice flat. A small laugh came through, soft, disbelieving. Lawyers are expensive. We can talk like adults, unless you prefer to keep pretending you are the victim. The word landed like a slap. She pictured the hole still in the drywall of the old house hallway, patched but never repainted. The place his fist had gone through 6 months before she left. I am not discussing anything without counsel, she said. His tone changed, not louder, just colder. If you push this, Ava, I will make sure you regret it. I have things you would not want brought into a courtroom. Things about your temper, your mental state, how you really are when no one is looking. Her pulse thudded in her ears. You know how people believe the calm one, he continued. And you have not exactly been calm lately. Silence stretched. Then the line went dead. Ava stood there with the phone still pressed to her ear long after the call ended. Her reflection in the microwave door looked like someone who had not slept in days, because she had not. She told herself it was just words, posturing, divorce poison. Still, her hands shook so badly she spilled half the coffee when she finally poured it. That afternoon she met her attorney, Marisol, in a small office that smelled faintly like printer toner and peppermint gum. Marisol listened without interrupting, fingers steepled under her chin. Did he make a direct threat of violence? Marisol asked. No. Did he reference specific information he would release? No. Marisol nodded slowly. Then this is intimidation. Not illegal by itself, but it is useful. It shows mindset, control tactics. We document everything. Ava let out a breath she did not realize she had been holding. I feel crazy, she said quietly. Like maybe I am overreacting. Marisol leaned forward. That feeling is not an accident. That is part of how this works. Ava looked down at her coffee cup. Her hand left a damp print on the cardboard sleeve. Mediation is about leverage, Marisol continued. He's trying to scare you into conceding before you sit at that table. It is working, Ava admitted. Marisol gave a small, steady smile. Then we change the balance. But we do it carefully, no direct contact. If he calls again, do not engage. Just document. Ava nodded. But inside, fear had already started shaping her decisions. 2 days later, she broke the rule. It was close to 9 at night. She was on the couch, still in her work clothes, laptop open but untouched. A frozen dinner tray sat on the coffee table, half-eaten and cold. Her phone buzzed again. Blocked number. She stared at it for a long time. Her heart said ignore it. Her dread said answer and get it over with. She answered. This time his voice came fast, like he had been pacing. We need to settle this like adults. You are dragging this out for drama. I am following legal advice, she said. You are trying to ruin me, he snapped. The sudden heat in his voice made her flinch even though she was alone. "No," she said, "I am trying to protect myself." "From what, Ava?" "Me." He laughed sharply. "I paid the mortgage. I paid your student loans. I gave you everything." "You gave me a panic disorder," she said before she could stop herself. The silence that followed felt like a cliff edge. Then his voice dropped to a whisper that made her skin crawl. "Be very careful what you say about me. You think anyone will believe you. I can say you were unstable. I can say you threatened me. You remember the night you threw that glass." She remembered. She had thrown a glass into the sink after he told her she was lucky he tolerated her. It had shattered. She had cried and cleaned it up herself while he watched. "That is not what happened," she said, her voice breaking. "Truth does not matter as much as you think," he said softly. "Stories do." Her chest tightened. "I could make sure you walk out of mediation with nothing," he continued, "and everyone thinking you are the problem." Her throat burned. She hated that tears were coming. He always knew exactly where to press. Then he said it. "I can make your life very, very difficult if you do not cooperate." The words were quiet, almost gentle. She felt herself shrinking like she used to at the kitchen table when the arguments dragged past midnight. "Okay," she heard herself say. The second the word left her mouth, she felt sick. He exhaled slowly, satisfied. "That is better. We will talk soon." The call ended. Ava sat frozen, phone still in her hand. Her body buzzed with shame. She had just agreed to talk, to break the boundary, to go back into the fog. She pressed her palms into her eyes until she saw stars. Then she did something she had never done before. She opened her settings and turned on call recording. She told herself it was just in case, a safety net, a quiet, private one. The next week passed in small humiliations. She forgot to eat lunch and got dizzy in a meeting. She cried in her car outside a grocery store because she could not remember what brand of cereal she used to buy. She reread old texts at night like they were crime scene photos, trying to pinpoint the moment love had turned into strategy. Then, 3 days before mediation, he called again. This time, she was ready. She sat at her kitchen table, laptop open, a legal pad beside her like she was about to take notes in a lecture. She answered. His tone was calm, too calm. "I spoke with my attorney," he said. "We both know you cannot prove half the things you are implying. If you push this narrative of emotional abuse, I will respond accordingly." She swallowed. "I am not implying anything." "You are trying to get more money by playing victim," he said. "That is fraud adjacent. Judges do not like that." Her stomach twisted. "I just want a fair division," she said. "Fair," he repeated, like the word tasted bad, "after everything I did for you." She did not respond. Then his voice hardened. "Let me be clear. If you go into mediation accusing me, I will make sure certain personal details about you come out. Medical stuff, your therapy, your panic attacks at work." She gripped the pen so hard it snapped in her hand. "You cannot do that," she said. "Watch me," he replied. Her ears rang. "And if you think anyone is going to side with a woman who cannot even keep herself together in a grocery store, you are delusional." Tears slid down her face silently. Then he said the sentence that changed everything. "You should be grateful. I am not the kind of man who would really ruin you." Something in his tone made her go still. "Really ruin you." Like there were levels, options, doors he was choosing not to open. Her fear sharpened into something else. Awareness. She glanced at the tiny red icon on her screen. Recording, he kept talking, circling the same themes. Power, reputation, control. And for the first time, she did not argue. She let him speak. She let him explain exactly who he was. When the call ended, she did not cry. She emailed the file to herself, to a new cloud folder, to a second backup. Then she sat very still, heart racing. staring at the waveform on the screen like it was a living thing. She did not know if it would matter, but for the first time, she did not feel completely defenseless. Mediation day arrived gray and cold. The conference room was neutral in that deliberate way meant to make conflict look professional. Beige walls, bottled water, a box of tissues placed in the center of the table like a silent prediction. He walked in with his attorney, smiling politely like they were at a networking event. Ava felt her hands go damp. He looked good. Rested, controlled. The version of him other people believed in. They did not make eye contact. The mediator, an older man with kind eyes, explained the process in a calm, practiced voice. "We are here to find resolution," he said. Ava almost laughed. Resolution. Like this was a scheduling issue. They went back and forth for hours. Numbers, assets, the house, retirement accounts. Every time Ava's attorney mentioned emotional distress or patterns of intimidation, his attorney objected smoothly. "There's no evidence of threats," she said. "My client has been cooperative throughout." Ava felt heat crawl up her neck. He sat there, hands folded, expression neutral. The picture of reason. At one point, he shook his head slightly, like he was sad she was making things difficult. The old reflex kicked in. Doubt. Shame. Maybe I am exaggerating. Maybe I am the problem. Her chest tightened. Marisol leaned over and whispered, "Breathe, we are not finished." Late afternoon, everyone tired, the air thick. The mediator turned to Ava. "Is there anything else you would like considered before we break for the day?" Her mouth went dry. This was the moment she had rehearsed and dreaded. She looked at Marisol. Marisol gave a small nod. Ava reached into her bag with trembling hands and pulled out her phone. "I have something relevant," she said, her voice barely steady. His head turned slowly. "Relevant how?" his attorney asked. Ava swallowed. "I have a recording of a phone call from last week." The room changed temperature. His jaw tightened just slightly, almost invisible. "Recording without consent may be illegal depending on jurisdiction," his attorney said quickly. Marisol spoke before Ava could panic. "We are in a one-party consent state." My client was part of the conversation. Silence fell. The mediator looked between them. "What is on the recording?" Ava forced herself to meet his eyes for the first time that day. "You threatening me," she said. He gave a soft, disbelieving laugh. "Ava, come on." Her hands shook so hard she had to set the phone on the table and press play. His voice filled the room. Calm, measured. "I can make your life very, very difficult if you do not cooperate." No raised volume, no shouting, just control. The mediator's expression changed first, then his attorney's. The recording continued. Medical information, reputation, stories over truth. Each word sounded worse in the sterile room than it had alone in her kitchen. When it ended, no one spoke for a long time. He stared at the table. Not at her. The mediator cleared his throat. "That language is concerning." His attorney leaned toward him, whispering urgently. For the first time all day he looked uncertain. Negotiations shifted after that. Subtly at first, then clearly. Numbers that had been non-negotiable moved. Language in the agreement changed to include mutual non-disparagement clauses. Clear boundaries. He stopped smiling. Ava felt like she was watching a magician drop the act mid-performance. The man who had told her no one would believe her now could not look up. When they finally stepped outside into the cold evening air, Ava's legs felt weak. Marisol squeezed her shoulder. "You did exactly the right thing." Ava nodded, but tears spilled anyway. Not from fear this time, from release. She sat in her car for a long time before starting the engine. Her reflection in the rearview mirror looked exhausted, puffy-eyed, fragile, but underneath the exhaustion was something new. Clarity. He had not changed. She had. That night, alone in her small apartment, she ate takeout straight from the container and let herself feel the mess of it all. Grief, anger, relief. She had loved him once. That part was still true, but loving someone did not mean protecting their image at the cost of your own safety. Her phone buzzed once. A message from an unknown email. "I cannot believe you did that. You have destroyed any chance of us being civil." She stared at the words. Then, for the first time in years, she did not feel the urge to explain herself. She deleted the message, blocked the address, and set her phone down without her heart racing. Weeks later, when the final agreement came through, it was not perfect, but it was fair, and more importantly, it was free. One evening, she found herself back at the same grocery store where she had once cried in the parking lot. She stood in the cereal aisle, staring at rows of bright boxes. For a second, the old wave of overwhelm threatened. Then she took a breath, picked one, and kept walking. The next morning felt strangely quiet. Not peaceful, just unfamiliar. Ava woke before her alarm and lay still, listening to the low hum of the refrigerator in the kitchen. No dread pressing on her chest. No replaying arguments in her head before her feet even hit the floor. Her body did not trust it. She moved slowly, like the floor might give way. In the bathroom mirror, she looked pale, eyes ringed with faint shadows, hair pulled back in a loose knot she did not remember making. "You are safe," she whispered to her reflection. The words felt fragile, but not fake. Work that day was ordinary in a way that almost made her cry. Emails, meetings, someone complaining about a spreadsheet. At lunch, she sat alone in her car with a sandwich and realized she was not scanning her phone for his name. The silence where anxiety used to live felt like an empty room after a loud party. That evening, her sister called. "How did it go?" she asked gently. Ava tried to answer casually. "We reached an agreement." There was a pause on the line, then her sister's voice softened. "I am proud of you." The words hit harder than any insult he had ever thrown at her. Ava turned her face away from the windshield as tears blurred the parking lot lights. "I almost folded," she admitted. "So many times." "But you did not," her sister said. "That is what matters." Still, healing was not a straight line. 2 nights later, Ava woke at 3 a.m., heart racing, convinced she had forgotten to send something important. Her mind jumped to worst-case scenarios. Courtrooms, accusations, losing everything after all. She sat up in bed, breathing hard, sheets twisted around her legs. It took several minutes before she realized the danger was not real, just memory echoing through her nervous system. She wrapped her arms around herself and rocked slightly, the way she used to calm students when she volunteered at the after-school program. "You are not there anymore," she murmured. It felt strange to offer herself the same patience she once reserved for others. A week after mediation, an envelope arrived. No return address she recognized. Her stomach dropped anyway. She carried it inside like it might explode, sat at the kitchen table, stared at it for a full minute before opening it. Inside was a single printed page, a copy of a text she had sent him 3 years ago during a bad fight. "I cannot do this anymore. You make me feel crazy." Underneath, in pen, he had written, "See?" Her hands went cold. For a moment, the old fear roared back to life. Proof, ammunition, another game. Then something steadier rose up behind it. Exhaustion. She set the paper down. Of course, he kept things. Of course, he believed context did not matter. She picked up her phone and took a photo of the letter and emailed it to Marisol with a short note. "Received this today, just documenting." Then she put the paper in a drawer and went back to making dinner. Her hands still shook a little while chopping vegetables, but she did not spiral. That felt like progress. Therapy became a weekly anchor. At first, Ava spent entire sessions recounting events in careful detail, like presenting evidence. Her therapist listened, then asked questions that felt almost unfair. When did you first start believing your feelings were not reliable? What did you need in those moments that you did not get? Why did staying feel safer than leaving for so long? The answers did not come quickly. Sometimes, Ava left sessions feeling raw and angry, as if scabs had been peeled back. But underneath the anger was something else. Space. One Saturday, she ran into him at a home improvement store. It was so ordinary it almost felt cruel. She was in the lighting aisle, comparing lampshades. He turned the corner, pushing a cart. They froze when they saw each other. Her heart slammed against her ribs. Her palms went damp. He recovered first. "You look okay," he said, like they were former co-workers. She noticed the new watch on his wrist, the crisp shirt, the version of himself he showed the world. "I am," she said. An awkward silence stretched. "I did not expect you to pull that stunt in mediation," he said quietly. There it was, not an apology, a complaint. "It was not a stunt," she replied. He shook his head. "You made me look like a monster." Ava felt something inside her settle. "I did not make you say those things," she said. For a second, anger flashed across his face. Then it smoothed back into control. He glanced around as if worried someone might overhear. "Well, I hope you are happy." The old Ava might have scrambled to soften the moment, to reassure him. This Ava just nodded once. "I hope you learned something from it," she said. She turned and walked away before her courage could dissolve. Her legs felt shaky, but she did not look back. That night, she sat on her couch with a blanket around her shoulders, replaying the encounter. Her mind tried to twist it into guilt. Maybe I was too cold, maybe I should have been kinder. Then she remembered the kitchen table, the threats, the way her voice used to disappear around him. Kindness did not mean self-erasure. Months passed, paperwork finalized, accounts separated. The legal ties that had once felt like chains slowly unwound. One evening, she stood by her apartment window watching rain streak down the glass. The city lights blurred into soft halos. She thought about the version of herself from that first morning in the kitchen, hands shaking over a cup of coffee. She had believed survival meant keeping the peace, staying small, avoiding escalation at all costs. Now she understood something different. Peace without safety was just quiet fear. Her phone buzzed on the counter. A message from a friend asking if she wanted to join a hiking group that weekend. Old Ava would have made an excuse. Too tired. Too anxious. This time, she typed back, "Sure. Send details." She hit send before she could overthink it. Later, lying in bed, she realized something had shifted in a way that did not feel dramatic or cinematic, just real. She was no longer waiting for him to define who she was. She was still messy, still healing, still sometimes scared for no clear reason. But when she closed her eyes that night, her body did not brace for impact, and that felt like the beginning of a different life. The hike was harder than Ava expected. The trail climbed steadily through damp earth and slick stones, the air sharp with the smell of pine and wet leaves. Her calves burned before the first mile was done. She almost turned back. Her chest tightened, breath coming too fast, the old, familiar panic flickering at the edges of her vision. Too much, too exposed, too far from the car. The woman walking beside her, a nurse named Lila with a loud laugh and bright purple shoelaces, slowed without making it obvious. "First time on this trail," Lila said, a little out of breath herself. "It tricks you at the start, gets easier after the ridge." Ava nodded, grateful for the excuse to pause. They stood looking out over a shallow valley where morning fog still clung low between the trees. "It is okay to go slow," Lila added. No one here is training for the Olympics. Something in Ava loosened. She had spent so many years trying to match someone else's pace, someone else's mood, someone else's version of acceptable. Going slow felt almost rebellious. At the ridge, the group stopped for water. People chatted about work, pets, a broken washing machine, ordinary lives, ordinary problems. No one knew her history. No one looked at her like she was fragile or dramatic. She was just another person sweating on a hill. It felt clean. That night, tired in a good way, Ava scrolled through old photos on her phone. Not the couple pictures. Not the holidays staged for social media. Just random snapshots. A crooked bookshelf she had built herself. A burnt lasagna she had laughed about with a friend. A blurry sunset from her old apartment balcony before she ever met him. Proof she had existed as a full person long before the marriage. She realized she had been measuring her life in before and after him. Maybe there was a bigger timeline than that. Spring edged in slowly. One afternoon, while reorganizing a closet, she found a small box she had shoved to the back months ago. Inside were things she had not been ready to face. A birthday card from him from their second year of marriage. A receipt from a weekend trip where they had laughed so hard in a diner she thought they would never stop. Her throat tightened. The memories were real. The good parts had existed. That was what made everything else so confusing. She sat on the floor with a box in her lap and let herself cry. Not the sharp panic tears from before. These were slower, heavier, grief without adrenaline. She did not try to rewrite the past into pure darkness. She also did not use the good moments to excuse the harm. Both could be true. That felt like a kind of maturity she had never been taught. Later that week, her therapist asked a question that stayed with her. If you never had to see him again, who would you be? Ava opened her mouth to answer and found nothing there. The silence stretched. I do not know, she finally admitted. Her therapist smiled gently. That is not a failure. That is an opening. So Ava started small. She signed up for a pottery class on Thursday nights, even though the idea of being bad at something in front of strangers made her stomach flip. The first class, she ruined 2 bowls and splattered clay on her jeans. She laughed, embarrassed and surprised by the sound of it. Her hands were messy. Her hands were messy with gray clay, fingernails packed with it, a streak across her wrist where she had pushed hair out of her face without thinking. The instructor came by, looked at her lopsided bowl, and nodded like it was exactly what it was supposed to be. Good. You are not trying to control it too much. Let the wheel teach you. Ava almost laughed at the accidental poetry of that. Let the wheel teach you. She had tried to control everything for so long. His moods, his reactions, the temperature of every room he walked into. Now she was sitting in a room full of strangers, hands spinning mud, and no one needed anything from her except presence. Driving home that night, she caught herself humming along to the radio. It startled her so much, she turned the volume down just to make sure it had really come from her. It had. Progress did not mean the past stopped knocking. One afternoon, she got a notification that a mutual friend had posted photos from a barbecue. He was in one of them, smiling, arms slung casually around someone new. Her stomach dropped so fast it felt like missing a stair. Of course, he moved on. Of course he looked fine. A hot wave of unfairness rushed through her. He gets to just start over, and I'm still rebuilding basic safety inside my own body. She put her phone down, picked it up again, zoomed in on the picture like she was searching for cracks in a wall. Then she caught herself. This was the old trap, measuring her healing against his performance. She turned the phone face down and went for a walk without music, letting the anger burn through her system instead of swallowing it. By the time she got home, the feeling had shifted from sharp to dull. still there, but not in control. A month later, she had to attend a court building for a final procedural signature. Not even in the same room as him. Just paperwork. Still, walking through the metal detector made her palms sweat. The smell of old carpet and copier toner pulled her straight back to mediation day. Her body remembered before her mind did. She stood in the hallway afterward, documents in hand, heart racing like she had just escaped something. Then she looked down at the folder. Signed, filed, done. No more shared accounts, no more legal tether. She had stepped outside into bright afternoon sun and felt the strangest urge to laugh and cry at the same time. So she did both, right there on the courthouse steps, one hand over her mouth, shoulders shaking. A woman walking past gave her a quick, knowing smile. Not pity, recognition. Like she had stood on those steps for her own reasons once. That evening, Ava did something small but symbolic. She changed her emergency contact form at work. For years, his name had been there out of habit, even after they separated. She had told herself she would update it later. Later had come. She typed in her sister's name instead. It felt like moving a final piece of furniture out of a house she no longer lived in. Summer came. One humid night she sat on her apartment balcony, legs tucked under her, watching distant lightning flicker behind clouds. Her phone buzzed with a calendar reminder she'd forgotten she set months ago. Mediation prep call. She stared at the words for a long time. That version of her had set reminders because she was afraid of forgetting something that could cost her everything. This version of her no longer needed them. She deleted the reminder. Sometimes she still had bad days. Days when a certain tone of voice from a coworker made her flinch. Days when she reread old journal entries and felt embarrassed by how long she stayed. Days when loneliness hit so suddenly she had to sit on the kitchen floor and breathe through it. Healing was not a straight staircase. It was a field she had to cross over and over, sometimes in sun, sometimes in fog. But she was moving. One Sunday morning she woke before dawn and could not fall back asleep. Instead of fighting it, she got up, made coffee, and sat by the window as the sky shifted from black to deep blue to pale gray. The city slowly came to life. A dog walker, a delivery truck, someone jogging with headphones in. Ordinary motion. She wrapped both hands around her mug and felt the warmth seep into her fingers. For so long, mornings had meant bracing, checking his mood, preparing for impact she could not predict. Now the day stretched ahead, undefined, unclaimed by anyone else. She did not know exactly who she was becoming yet, but she knew one thing with a quiet certainty. No one else would get to threaten her into silence again. And if they tried, she would not shrink. She would record. She would speak. She would choose herself. Autumn came quietly. Leaves gathered along the curb outside her apartment like small, brittle reminders that change did not have to be loud to be real. Ava had started marking time differently. Not by court dates, not by legal deadlines, not by how long it had been since he last tried to contact her. She marked time by things she had done for the first time without fear sitting in the passenger seat. First solo day trip. First dinner at a restaurant alone without pretending to be busy on her phone. First time she disagreed with someone at work and did not apologize just to smooth it over. One evening at pottery class, her instructor asked everyone to make something they actually needed, not just something decorative. Ava stared at the spinning clay, hands steady on either side. What do I need? The answer surprised her. A mug. Not a perfect one, not a matching set, just one mug that felt good in her hands. She shaped it slowly, thumbs pressing into the warm clay, the wheel humming under her palms. The rim came out slightly uneven, the handle a little thick. She loved it immediately. The first morning, she drank coffee from it. Sitting by the window with the rain tapping softly against the glass, she felt a small, private pride. This exists because I made it. No one else's approval required. There were still echoes. A sharp male voice in a parking lot could make her shoulders jump. A tense email could send her heart racing for a few minutes. But the recovery time shortened. Where fear used to swallow entire days, now it passed like a storm cloud. Loud, dark, then moving on. One Friday after work, Lila from the hiking group invited her to a small backyard gathering. Nothing fancy. Just a fire pit, mismatched lawn chairs, and people passing around chips and homemade salsa. Ava almost said no out of habit. Then she heard her therapist's voice in her head. An opening. So she went. At some point in the evening, someone asked how she knew Lila. Hiking group, Ava said. That was it. Not through my ex, not we used to hang out as couples, not a story anchored to him, just something she chose. Later, sitting by the fire watching sparks rise into the dark, she felt a quiet shift in her chest. For the first time, her life story did not feel like a chapter torn out of a longer book. It felt like a new volume entirely. That night, lying in bed, she thought about the woman she'd been on that morning in the kitchen months ago. Hands shaking over spilled coffee, voice small on the phone. She did not judge her. That woman had survived the only way she knew how. But survival was not the same as living. Ava rolled onto her side, pulling the blanket up to her chin. The apartment was quiet. Not the tense quiet of waiting. Just space. Her phone rested on the nightstand. No blocked numbers lighting up the screen. No threats disguised as conversations. Just a simple alarm set for the morning. She closed her eyes. Not bracing, not bargaining, not replaying, just resting. Winter settled in with a kind of honesty Ava had grown to appreciate. The trees outside her window stood bare, nothing hidden, nothing pretending to bloom out of season. She felt a strange kinship with that. One afternoon, almost a year after mediation, she found herself back in the same conference center for a work training. The building smelled the same. Neutral carpet, stale coffee, climate control set a little too cold. For a split second, her body tensed, memory firing before logic could catch up. Mediation day, threats. The recording. Her pulse quickened. She stopped walking. Placed one hand flat against the cool wall. Looked around. Different people, different purpose, different version of me. Her breathing slowed. She walked into the conference room anyway. Sat down. Took notes about project management software while her nervous system slowly realized there was no danger here. When she left at the end of the day, she felt quietly proud. A year ago, that building would have unraveled her. Now, it was just a building. That evening, she called her sister while cooking pasta. I went back to that place today, she said. Her sister knew immediately which place. How was it? Hard for a minute. Then just normal. There was a smile in her sister's voice. That is how you know you are healing. When the places lose their power. Later that night, Ava sat at her kitchen table with her pottery mug between her hands. Steam curling up toward her face. Snow had started falling. Soft and steady, blurring the streetlights outside. She thought about everything she had learned that year. Not in neat lessons, but in lived realizations. That love without safety is not love. That fear can sound like loyalty if you are not careful. That evidence matters, but so does trusting your own memory. That her voice, once recorded, once played back in a quiet room, had more strength than she ever knew. Her phone buzzed, an unknown number. Her heart gave a small automatic jump. Then she looked at the screen, calm. She let it ring. It went to voicemail. A minute later, a notification. A robotic message about an extended car warranty. She laughed out loud, the sound filling the apartment. warm and unguarded. Even her fear reflex was learning to stand down. She carried her mug to the window and watched the snow thicken, covering the sidewalks, the parked cars, the edges of the world. For years, she had thought strength meant enduring quietly, keeping the peace, absorbing the damage so things did not explode. Now she understood something else. Strength was setting a boundary even when your voice shook. Strength was pressing record. Strength was letting the truth exist outside your own head. She rested her forehead lightly against the cool glass. Her life was not perfect. She still had therapy appointments on the calendar. Still had days where old memories rose up sharp and unexpected. But she no longer lived inside a constant negotiation with someone else's temper. Her time was her own. Her space was her own. Her voice was her own. Behind her, the apartment hummed with small, ordinary sounds. The refrigerator, the heater kicking on, the soft tick of the kitchen clock. Nothing dramatic, nothing cinematic, just a life. And for the first time in a very long time, that was more than enough. In early spring, Ava did something she would not have imagined a year ago. She volunteered to help at a community legal clinic on Saturday mornings. She was not a lawyer. She did not give advice. She just helped people fill out forms, make copies, organize documents into folders that felt less overwhelming than loose stacks of paper. Still, every time someone sat across from her with tired eyes and a folder clutched too tightly, she recognized the look. The look of someone who had been doubted for so long they were not sure their own story counted. One morning, a woman about Ava's age sat down, hands shaking as she tried to explain why she needed a protection order. "I do not have proof," the woman kept saying. It was mostly things he said. Ava felt a quiet steadiness settle in her chest. "Words matter," she said gently. "Patterns matter. Write down dates, times, what was said, how it made you feel." The woman nodded, tears sliding down her face, relief mixing with fear. Ava did not tell her whole story. It was not about that. But when she handed the woman a neatly clipped stack of papers, she felt the echo of a different day. A different table, a phone on speaker, a voice in a quiet room that finally could not be dismissed. After the clinic, Ava walked home through a park just beginning to green. Children ran past with kites. A couple argued softly on a bench, then leaned into each other, working it out in real time. Life, messy and ongoing. She sat on a low stone wall and let the sun warm her face. For so long she had thought her story was about what he did, what he said, what he threatened. Now it felt bigger than that. It was about the moment she decided her fear did not get the final vote. That evening she met Lila and a few others for dinner. At one point, between jokes about bad dates and complaints about traffic, Lila nudged her. "You seem lighter lately," she said. Ava considered that. Not lighter, exactly. Stronger in the same body, she said. Later, alone in her apartment, she washed her pottery mug carefully and set it on the drying rack. She caught her reflection in the dark window above the sink. There were still lines of tiredness around her eyes, still traces of everything she had carried. But there was something else, too, a groundedness that had not been there before. Her phone buzzed on the counter. A calendar reminder for her next therapy session. She smiled and left it there. No rush to silence it. No urge to escape the work. Healing was not an emergency anymore. It was just part of her life. Before bed, she opened the Notes app on her phone and typed a single line. "I believe myself." She did not post it anywhere, did not share it. She just read it once, nodded slightly, and turned off the light. A few weeks later, Ava stood in the hallway outside the small community center classroom, holding a paper cup of coffee that had already gone lukewarm. A printed sign taped crookedly to the door read, "Boundaries Workshop, Saturday, 10 a.m." She almost turned around. Not because she did not believe in the topic, because she did. And that made it personal. Inside, folding chairs were arranged in a loose circle. A whiteboard leaned against the wall with a list of phrases written in blue marker. I am not comfortable with that. I need time to think. That does not work for me. Simple sentences. Sentences that once would have felt impossible in her mouth. She took a seat, listened, shared a little when it felt right, passed when it did not. At one point, the facilitator asked everyone to think of a moment they ignored their own boundary and what it cost them. Ava did not have to think long. What did it cost you? The facilitator asked gently. Time, Ava said. Her voice did not shake, just time. Walking home afterward, she felt oddly peaceful. Not because the past had vanished, but because she could talk about it now without disappearing inside it. That afternoon, she cleaned out a drawer she had been avoiding. Old cables, expired coupons, a stack of folded papers at the back. She recognized the top one immediately. A printed transcript of the recording. Marisol had given it to her after mediation in case she ever needed it again. Ava had shoved it away, unsure if keeping it was empowering or just another way to stay tied to the worst day. She sat on the floor, back against the couch, and read a few lines. His voice on the page sounded smaller than it had in her memory. Petty, controlling, afraid of losing power. She felt no rush of panic, just distance. She fed the pages slowly through her small shredder, the machine whirring as the words turned into thin, harmless strips. She kept the digital copy in a secure folder. Practical. Quiet. But she did not need the paper version staring back at her anymore. That evening, she called her sister. Guess what I did today, she said. Oh no, her sister teased. Should I be worried? I shredded the transcript. There was a soft pause. Are you okay with that? Yeah, Ava said, surprising herself with how sure she felt. I do not need it to remember what happened, and I do not need it to prove anything to myself anymore. Later, she sat on her balcony with a book open on her lap, though she had not turned a page in 10 minutes. The sky faded from blue to deep violet. Someone nearby played music softly, the bass thumping through the warm air. Her life still had unanswered questions. Would she trust someone new someday? Would she move to a different city? Would the old fear ever disappear completely? She did not know, but for the first time the unknown did not feel like a threat. It felt like space. Her phone buzzed with a message from the hiking group. Trail this Sunday. You in? She smiled. Yeah, she typed back. I am in. Then she set the phone down, leaned back in her chair and let the evening settle around her. Not waiting for something to go wrong. Not bracing for a voice to cut through the quiet. Just existing in a life she had rebuilt, piece by piece. Sunday morning came cool and bright. Ava parked near the trailhead and sat in her car for a moment, watching sunlight catch in the leaves overhead. Her reflection in the rearview mirror looked calm, not fearless, just present. She grabbed her water bottle and stepped out. The group was smaller this time. Lila waved from beside a wooden trail map. We are trying the longer loop, she said. Scenic payoff at the end. Ava nodded. Scenic payoff. She liked the sound of that. The trail wound through tall grass and scattered wildflowers. Birds lifted out of the brush as they passed. Someone told a story about getting lost on a different trail last month, and everyone laughed. At a narrow section where the path sloped down sharply, Ava hesitated. The dirt looked loose. One wrong step and she could slide. You good? Lila asked from behind her. Yeah, Ava said, then corrected herself. Actually, can we take this part slow? Of course. They moved carefully, one step at a time. Ava felt a quiet pride bloom in her chest. She had asked for what she needed without apologizing for it. No one had rolled their eyes. No one had called her dramatic. They had just adjusted. It should not have felt revolutionary, but it did. At the overlook, the view opened wide. A valley stretched out below, a river cutting a bright line through green. Wind tugged at her hair, cool against her cheeks. Everyone pulled out phones for pictures. Ava did too, then paused. Instead, she lowered it and just looked. She wanted the moment in her body, not only on a screen. On the hike back, conversation drifted toward weekend plans, work stress, small complaints that felt almost luxurious in their normalcy. Ava realized she had not thought about him once in the last 2 hours. Not avoided, not suppressed, just absent. The realization hit her with unexpected force. She had not just survived him, she had begun to outgrow the shadow of him. That evening, tired and sun-warmed, she sat at her kitchen table with her pottery mug and a notebook. She wrote down a list, not of goals, not of fears, of things she liked. The smell of rain on hot pavement, mugs with thick handles, walking uphill even when it is hard, being asked what I need and answering honestly. Quiet mornings, music playing in another room. The list felt small and enormous at the same time. These were not things he had chosen, not things shaped around his preferences. These were hers. She closed the notebook and looked around her apartment. The furniture was mismatched, the walls still mostly bare. A lamp leaned slightly to one side because she had assembled it wrong and never fixed it. It was not a showroom. It was hers. Her phone buzzed with a message from her therapist confirming their next session. Ava typed back to confirm, then added something she had never said before. I think I am doing better than I expected. 3 dots appeared. That is because you are not just surviving anymore. You are building. Ava set the phone down and let that settle. Building. Not a dramatic reinvention, not a movie montage. Just steady, ordinary choices stacking up into a life where her voice counted. Outside, the evening light softened, stretching long shadows across the floor. Ava picked up her mug, held it between both hands, and breathed in the steam. For a moment, everything was simple. She was here. She was safe. She was allowed to take up space. A few days later, Ava stayed late at work finishing a report she had procrastinated on for weeks. The office was quiet. Lights dimmed in the hallway, the cleaning crew moving somewhere on another floor. Around 8 p.m., she finally shut her laptop and leaned back in her chair. A year ago, being alone in an empty building at night would have made her uneasy. Her mind would have filled the silence with worst-case scenarios. Now, the quiet just felt like quiet. As she packed up, a co-worker from another department stopped by her desk. Hey, do you have a minute tomorrow to help me think through something? He asked. Ava almost said yes automatically. She always had. Even when her own workload was already too much. Even when helping others meant staying late and burning out quietly. Tomorrow is tight for me, she said instead. I could do Thursday afternoon. He nodded easily. That works. Thanks. He walked away without disappointment, without judgment. Ava stood there for a moment, stunned by how ordinary that exchange had been. A boundary set. A boundary respected. No fallout. On the drive home, she rolled down the window and let cool air rush in, city lights streaking past. She felt something close to joy. Not the loud kind, the steady kind that hums under the surface of an ordinary night. Later that week, she met her therapist for what they had tentatively labeled a check-in session instead of a crisis management one. So, her therapist said, settling into her chair, what feels different lately? Ava thought for a moment. I am not scanning for danger all the time, she said. I still notice things, but I am not braced every second. That is a big shift. Yeah, it is like my nervous system finally believes what my brain has known for a while. That it is over, her therapist smiled. That is integration. Your body catching up to reality. On the way home, Ava stopped by a small bookstore she had passed 100 times but never gone into. Inside, it smelled like paper and coffee. Soft music played from somewhere in the back. She wandered the aisles slowly, running her fingers along spines, picking up books at random. No one knew her there. No one expected anything from her. She bought a novel purely because she liked the cover. No research, no justification. At the register, the cashier asked if she wanted a receipt. Yes, she said, smiling. Proof that she had bought something just because she wanted it. That night, curled on the couch with a new book and a blanket, she felt a deep, unfamiliar contentment. Not because her life was dramatic or extraordinary, but because it was finally aligned with her own pace, her own voice. Before bed, she stood in the bathroom brushing her teeth, catching her reflection in the mirror. She still saw traces of the woman who had once stood frozen in a kitchen, phone in hand, voice small. But layered over that image was someone else. Someone who had spoken up when it mattered. Someone who had recorded the truth instead of swallowing it. Someone who had chosen herself, even while shaking. She turned off the light and slid into bed. Her phone rested on the nightstand, screen dark and quiet. No dread about what might come through it. No rehearsed arguments looping in her head, just a simple alarm set for the morning. She closed her eyes, not waiting for the other shoe to drop, just resting in the life she had claimed, one boundary at a time. One morning, almost without thinking, Ava changed the ringtone on her phone. The old one had been sharp and urgent, chosen back when every call felt like it might carry bad news. The new one was softer. A low, simple chime that sounded more like a door gently closing than an alarm. She did not realize how much that small change mattered until later that day when it rang while she was at her desk. Her shoulders did not jump. Her stomach did not drop. She just glanced at the screen and answered. That weekend, she decided to tackle the blank wall in her living room. For months, she had meant to hang something there, photos, art, anything. But part of her had felt stuck, like claiming the space too fully might tempt fate. Now, she spread everything out on the floor. A print from the hiking overlook. A postcard her sister sent from a beach trip. A small abstract painting she made in a community art class she almost quit halfway through. She arranged and rearranged until the wall felt balanced, lived in. When she finally stepped back, drill still warm in her hand, she felt a quiet surge of ownership. This is my home, not a temporary holding space, not a waiting room between crises. Later that afternoon, she sat on the couch looking at the wall, sunlight catching the edges of the frames. Her phone buzzed with a group chat message from the hiking crew. Someone had twisted an ankle and was joking about becoming the official snack carrier for future trips. Ava smiled and typed back an offer to bring extra water next time. She noticed how easy it felt to be part of something that did not revolve around managing someone else's emotions. That night, she dreamed of a house she did not recognize. In the dream, she walked from room to room, opening windows that had been painted shut. Light poured in, dust lifting into the air like tiny sparks. When she woke, the feeling lingered. Not everything in her life had changed. She still had bills, deadlines, days where anxiety tapped at the door. But more and more, she was the one deciding which windows opened. A few days later, an email arrived from the legal clinic coordinator. They were starting a support group for people navigating high-conflict separations. Would she be willing to share her experience in one session? Ava stared at the screen. Her first instinct was to say she was not qualified, that someone else, someone braver or more articulate, should do it. Then she remembered the woman at the clinic who kept saying she had no proof. She typed back, "Yes, I would be happy to help." The night before the group, nerves fluttered in her chest. Not fear of him, not fear of being silenced, just the vulnerability of telling the truth out loud. She wrote a few notes on an index card. I did not know it was intimidation until I heard it outside my own head. I thought I was weak for being scared. I was not. Documentation is not revenge. It is protection. Your feelings are data. At the session, she sat in a circle of folding chairs with strangers who looked both exhausted and hopeful. When it was her turn to speak, her voice trembled for the first few sentences. Then it steadied. She did not tell every detail. She did not need to. She told the part that mattered. I thought staying quiet would keep the peace. It only kept me small. The moment I let the truth exist outside of me, everything shifted. Afterward, a woman approached her quietly. "Thank you," she said. "I thought I was overreacting." Ava shook her head. "You are reacting to something real," she said. "Trust that." Walking home under streetlights, cool air against her cheeks, Ava felt a deep, grounded calm. Her story was no longer just something she had survived. It was something she could use to light the path for someone else, even in a small way. Back in her apartment, she set her keys on the table and glanced at the wall of frames. Moments she had chosen, places she had walked, things she had made, evidence of a life expanding instead of shrinking. Her phone chimed softly from the counter. A text from her sister. "Proud of you, always." Ava smiled, typing back a heart before setting the phone down. She moved through the apartment, turning off lights one by one, the rooms dimming into quiet. When she slipped into bed, there was no rehearsal of old conversations, no dread about what tomorrow might bring, just the steady rhythm of her own breathing, and the quiet certainty that her voice, once nearly erased, was now something she would never give up again. Weeks passed, then months. The seasons kept turning, indifferent to everything Ava had survived, everything she had rebuilt. And that, strangely, comforted her. Life did not pause for heartbreak. It did not hold still for fear. It kept moving. And now she was moving with it instead of bracing against it. One evening in the early summer, she hosted a small dinner in her apartment. Nothing fancy, pasta, salad, a bottle of wine someone else brought. Lila came. Her sister drove in for the weekend. 2 people from the hiking group squeezed around the table that was technically too small for 5 adults. At one point, everyone was talking at once, laughing over each other, someone gesturing wildly and nearly knocking over a glass. Ava stood for a moment at the edge of the kitchen, watching them. This noise, this warmth, this life. There had been a time she believed gatherings like this were only possible if she managed everything perfectly, kept the mood light, smoothed over tension before it surfaced. Now, she just let it be messy and real. When someone accidentally spilled water, they grabbed a towel and kept talking. No one froze, no one spiraled. The world did not end over a small mistake. After everyone left, dishes stacked in the sink and crumbs still on the counter, Ava leaned against the doorway and let the quiet settle back in. Not the old quiet of isolation. The good kind. The kind that comes after connection, not instead of it. Later that night, she found the notebook where she had once written a list of things she liked. She flipped to a new page and added more. Hosting dinner, even if the table is too small. Letting people see my unfinished life. Saying no without a speech to justify it. The sound of my own laughter in a room. Helping someone else feel less alone. She closed the notebook gently. This was the life she had been building without realizing it had already begun. Not every day was easy. There were still mornings when old dreams left her unsettled. Still moments when a certain tone of voice made her stomach tighten. Still waves of grief for the version of love she thought she had. But those feelings no longer defined the shape of her days. They moved through her instead of trapping her. One afternoon, almost 2 years after that first shaking phone call in the kitchen, Ava found herself back in the cereal aisle of the same grocery store. She stood there for a moment, hand resting on a box, memory brushing past like a ghost. The panic in the parking lot, the confusion, the feeling that her life was unraveling faster than she could understand it. She felt tenderness for that version of herself. You were doing your best, she thought, even when your best looked like barely holding on. She put the cereal in her cart and kept walking. That evening, as the sun set in streaks of orange and pink outside her window, Ava sat with her pottery mug and a book she was not quite ready to finish. Her phone lay nearby, silent. Not because she was afraid to answer it, because no one was trying to control her through it anymore. She thought about the recording sometimes, not with fear, not with rage, but with a quiet understanding of what it represented. The moment she stopped arguing with herself about whether her experience was real. The moment she let the truth be heard outside the walls of her own mind. The moment her voice, shaky and small, became evidence instead of doubt. She had not won everything. She had not come out of the marriage untouched. But she had come out with herself, and that was more than she once believed possible. Night settled over the city. Lights flickered on in other apartments, other lives unfolding behind thin walls. Ava stood and moved through her home, turning off lamps, straightening a chair, rinsing her mug. Small rituals, ordinary endings to ordinary days. She paused at the window one last time, looking out at the quiet street below. No one was watching her. No one was waiting to criticize her. No one was threatening to twist her story into something unrecognizable. Her life was no longer a negotiation. It was a choice, renewed every day in small, steady ways. She turned off the last light and walked to her bedroom. As she slid under the covers, the room dark and calm around her, she felt the weight of the day settle into her muscles. Not the weight of fear, the weight of living. Her phone rested on the nightstand, screen dark. Her breathing slowed, and in the quiet, with no one left to silence her, Ava finally rested in the simple, hard-won truth of her own voice. If this story felt real to you, if you have ever doubted your own voice, or needed the strength to stand up when it was hardest, you are not alone here. This channel is built for people who have been silenced, underestimated, or made to feel small, and are quietly finding their power again. Subscribe to follow more stories about quiet strength, hard truths, and the moments that change everything. And if this story stayed with you, share in the comments what part hit home. Your voice might be the one someone else needs to hear today.